let me sort of formally welcome you to Creative Mornings Columbus. I'm your host, David Staley. As you can see, going through our slide deck here this morning, we always give a shout out and thanks to our global sponsors, MailChimp and Skillshare. There's Skillshare. But Creative Mornings Columbus doesn't happen without the support of our partners, Moody Nolan and Beam Dental, who've been longtime partners with us here. And I wanted to do this morning as well, if only because it's our birthday. Although not everyone on our team is here this morning, but I wanted to draw attention to the team that puts together Creative Mornings Columbus every month. And I'll be introducing Brandy Lust here in a moment in another context. But Joel Burke is on the call this morning, who's been there almost from the beginning, I think. And Autumn Theodore, who is actually not able to join us today because she's visiting her mother, or with her mother, and which is, I think, a perfectly important and valid reason not to be at Creative Mornings Columbus. And Sam Javer, our videographer, who makes certain that the videos that we produce each month look amazing. Creative Mornings Columbus doesn't happen without this, let me stress, volunteer team, people that are giving their time and labor and their effort to make Creative Mornings Columbus a reality. And that I thank them from the bottom of my heart. There is no Creative Mornings Columbus without them. We are also, as I say, celebrating our 5th anniversary. And Joel, if we could find that one slide, I think this is terrific. Joel has put together a terrific slide. This is a list of all of our speakers over the last 5 years. And I know that we are honored to have with us today some of our former speakers. And I mentioned Brandy Lust. Brandy, I want to say that you spoke at our first birthday celebration, if I'm remembering this correctly, at the Columbus Museum of Art.
That's right. It was the first birthday celebration. And I remember it was, I still have the coffee mug for Creative Mornings. So it was a great event. I spoke about compassion.
I remember that, yes. And we did a really interesting sort of, not workshop, but you had us, I remember, look at each other silently for 30 seconds. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was one of the most amazing experiences, to look at each other silently.
That's right. And if I remember correctly, I actually forgot to time it, and you all were a little bit past 30 seconds. So
it still worked. We have the two Jessies here, Jesse Schroeder and Jesse Glover. Thank you both.
Absolutely. It's wonderful.
Hi, Jesse. Good to see you again.
Here. Yeah, good to see you as well. So glad to be here.
And Cindy is muted and doesn't have her video up. And so I hope that Cindy doesn't mind hopping on. But Cindy Foley. And I can't remember exactly the date that you spoke, Cindy, but I remember we were at the barn in Upper Arlington.
We were, and I was muted because I was still eating my breakfast, which is typically what we would all be doing right now. Yes,
we would all be doing that if we were face to face. We would all be enjoying good coffee and eating breakfast together, and we will, damn it, we will be doing this again.
That's
right. That is going to be happening, but Zoom has had to suffice. And I just want to, I guess I just want to be mindful of this slide right here. And Joel, it looks like you're pulling your cursor around there. There is a notable gap in this list of speakers, right? And so that's April there of 2020, when we had, that was the one and the only event we've had to cancel because of COVID. And again, I'm just so grateful that from April 2020 to the present, we've been able to have speakers, we've been able to have events. Zoom is far from ideal, but it has been something that has been that's allowed us to continue Creative Mornings Columbus. And as I say, that will be the case at least for a little while longer before we can finally be back face to face. And I wouldn't have to cut off conversations over breakfast like I did with Jesse and Zeb, unfortunately. I wanted to talk a little bit about the theme dare before we started our conversation, or at least I wanted to seed our conversation around dare. And as I am always want to do, I always go to look at word origins and word meanings before I sort of think about or consider sort of any sort of subject. And dare, of course, is the act of daring or defying, a defiance or a challenge. As a verb, it means courage to do something or to be so bold as to do something. And when I first learned that dare was going to be the theme, my mind raced back to 6th grade. And I'm considerably older here than I think most everyone here, not everyone, but most everyone. But when I was in 6th grade, in my science class, we were studying batteries, like batteries, like the kind you put in a toy or something like that. And of course, we were looking at diagrams of the inside of the battery. And all I remember was my teacher, one of my favorite teachers, Mrs. McLean. I remember her name to this day. She told us, do not open a battery. That is a dangerous thing to do. Do not open a battery. And so me and some buddies, of course, at recess, you know what we did. We went out and opened a battery, and we got in all kinds of trouble for this because we defied the teacher. But we did. We opened a battery and we saw inside, and we knew not to touch the acid because some acid got out. And I suppose we learned for ourselves. But all I remember was when the teacher said, don't do it. Don't open a battery. I just took that as a dare. I took that as a challenge. And I took that maybe as sort of an act of defiance. Although an act of defiance in the realm of science and creativity. And maybe that's okay. And in fact, as I was sort of ruminating on that, I thought that in some ways, maybe that's where creativity begins. It begins with an act of defiance or an act of challenge, or the courage maybe to do something that you hadn't thought about before. The name Madeleine L'Engle. She wrote A Wrinkle in Time, which was made in a movie, but you must know Madeleine L'Engle. This was a lecture she gave in 1984. They turned into a book. The book is out of print. I had to sort of bootleg this from the Library of Congress. But she wrote in 1984, Dare to be Creative. And I thought, boy, if this doesn't speak both to this theme and to this group, I don't know what else will. She begins by evoking a portion of T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Maybe you've read before. I'm going to read a small part of it, though, as a way to seed our conversation today. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? And it's that last line, of course, that Madeleine L'Engle draws a special attention to. Do I dare disturb the universe? In her lecture, in the book, she says, the stories I cared about, the stories I read and reread, were usually stories which dared to disturb the universe, which asked questions rather than gave answers. I turned to story then as now, looking for truth, for it is in story that we find glimpses of meaning rather than in textbooks. But how apologetic many adults are when they are caught reading a book of fiction. They tend to hide it and tell you about the how-to book, which is what they are really reading. Fortunately, nobody ever told me that stories were untrue or should be outgrown. And that as now they nourished me and kept me willing to ask the unanswerable questions. And that'll be part of, I think, our conversation this morning, is asking those unanswerable questions. She goes on, we need to dare disturb the universe by not being manipulated or frightened by judgmental groups who assume the right to insist that if we do not agree with them, not only do we not understand, but we are wrong. How dull the world would be if we all had to feel the same way about everything. If we all had to like the same books and dislike the same books. But I believe that good questions are more important than answers. And the best children's books, she wrote children's books, of course, and we know her for that. The best children's books ask questions and make the reader ask questions. And every new question is going to disturb someone's universe. But we need to disturb the universe if, as human beings on planet Earth, we are to survive, she wrote in 1984. We need to have the vocabulary to question ourselves and enough courage to disturb creatively rather than destructively, even if it's going to make us uncomfortable or even hurt. So let us look for beauty and grace, for love and friendship, for that which is creative and birth-giving and soul-stretching. Let us dare to laugh at ourselves, healthy, affirmative laughter. Only when we take ourselves lightly can we take ourselves seriously, so that we are given the courage to say, yes, I dare disturb the universe. And I'm going to suggest that that's what we should do today. We should disturb the universe a little bit. We don't have a speaker this month as such, and we're doing something that we did back in, I think, January 20, or something, maybe it was just before the pandemic or in the midst of the pandemic. We had a community conversation, and that's what we wanted to do this morning. Joel, can you put up the slide with the prompt or the question? And I hope it's a question that that affords us the opportunity to disturb the universe, or at least our particular corner. To dare is an act of faith. We work up the nerve to make the soaring leap, even when we don't know what the outcome will be. At the core of daring, you'll find bravery and defiance entwined. This is all coming from HQ. We dare to challenge the stories passed down to us that no longer fit, the stories that limit our imagination. And that's what we were going to do in breakouts today. We were going to have you, in a sense, dare to disturb our universe. Let's dare to imagine new stories for our city. I'm really interested in your disturbances, I suppose, and we hope that you'll take the admonition to dare to be creative in imagining new stories for our cities. As I said, we're going to break out into breakout rooms. I think at some stage we will come back and we'll want to hear what conversations were sort of generated by everyone. Really interested in the results that you come up with. So I'm going to go ahead and set up breakout rooms. In some ways, it is, I think, sort of a question, Brandy, or maybe you want to frame it in the form of a question.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I think that we could maybe frame it something like, what can you dare to imagine for the future of our city? Yeah. Like, despite the challenges that we've been through and, the things that we're still facing, what can we dare to imagine for us?
Yes. COVID and others. COVID and others. I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. Very interested to hear the conversations that you have. Be back in 20 or so. Cindy, I would have loved to have spent more time in your room. I can't imagine the conversation.
Oh, we could have gone for another 3 hours.
I know.
That 5-minute warning is just cruel. It's just cruel.
Sorry.
I was in the middle of sharing a story about you, Cindy.
Oh, that's funny.
Diana, you need to tell us. You need to give us the 20-second version.
Yeah, I need to hear the rest of it.
So our group, we all happen to be parents. And so we talked about, disrupting in that realm, but also in our careers. And I was just in the middle of telling Ashley a story that I had with Cindy once about how sometimes as a parent, there's been times where I've been like, you know what, forget homework. Like, I don't care about what you were assigned. Like, let's go to the museum. Let's look at some art. Like, let's think about it. Like, let's ask questions about it. Let's reflect about it. And sometimes those experiences and lessons are way more valuable than the homework that is assigned. I'm sorry about, for anyone who's like a teacher, it's not like I do this like on a daily basis, but every once in a while, like, it's okay to make that disruption. I think kids need that nowadays.
So I'm curious, so I was hopping around between the different groups and participating in various levels. Sort of quick summaries or observations. Did you disturb the universe? Or at least the Columbus universe?
I think we're in the process of doing that.
I think what Diana was saying about disruption in the educational system ties into something that we were talking about in our group, kind of overcoming the limitations of authoritarianism and dogma in an idealized future. And I think, even though Cindy said the 5-minute warning was horrible, I thought the 1-minute warning was even worse. But Roderick had just talked about disrupting the authorities in the educational system who are there holding on to power as opposed to really promoting education. And in addition to being an inaugural member of Creative Mornings Columbus, I've also been a member for a long time of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. And there was one of the luncheons where it was about transportation in the city, which I guess ties in a little bit with some of the smart city initiatives. And at the time, God, I forgot the name of the woman who's now in charge of CODA, and she previously had been at Honda, and she was congratulating all the disruptors. And I agree wholeheartedly that we really need to look at and evaluate what is what are the motives of those in power, and disrupt the ones that really are about just maintaining power, and move forward with looking about improving situations. But I also had an issue with disruption just for the sake of disruption, as someone who is also a bit of a historian, that we begin to lose some of the foundations that got us to where we are now, that have evolved. So
Zeb, since Felicia's left, I wonder if you could give like a summary of the sorts of things you were talking about in your group, because it was terrific. Thank you, Raymond.
So we went, I think, in an interesting direction, which is the difficulty of trying to make it as a creative in Columbus, which I think is really probably a universal difficulty. If it's difficult here because it sometimes feels like there are fewer opportunities, it's just as difficult in New York because there are so many people fighting for the same sort of, small, ever vanishing or shrinking pool of creative opportunities. So I think where Felicia and I were sort of, and I think Brian was with us on this too, is finding ways that people who work as creatives can, frankly, find fulfilling work outside of that and use that to support creative endeavors, which is honestly my own interest. I mean, I kind of think that's how I've shaped my professional life, at least for the moment.
Too many creatives work in restaurants. There's
Yeah, I
nothing
mean, that's
wrong
sort of
with
the
that, but it seems that there's an association. Creatives work in restaurants. What if creatives
Because-
worked in other sorts of industries? Sorry, Zeb.
Really, and that's precisely it. I mean, I think a lot of creatives end up working in restaurants because it's flexible and because it's there. If nothing else, there is steady demand for it. But anybody who's worked in the restaurant biz can also tell you it's really hard and pay is not very steady. And something like COVID happens and then it completely disrupts the restaurant industry. So what if creative people became, not to put myself on the spot, but software developers, or worked in communications departments, or you can imagine sort of what that would actually look like. So, what would it be great if Columbus looked like in 10 years? It would be a great place if creatives could actually make a living here and still be creative comfortably. I think that was the direction we were going in.
And part of what that group was talking about was sort of how to make that happen. And one of the suggestions I made was maybe this is a conversation that should be, or maybe this is an infrastructure that should be set up by the Columbus Partnership, not by like GCAC. Or that we at least get the Columbus Partnership more involved in this. Cindy, what was your group discussing? Like I said, I was trying to be a fly on the wall in every one of these, but I couldn't spend enough time in yours.
Well, the one thing I think we went in a number of directions, but the one I'm going to bring up is how deeply connected I felt and shared with the group this topic was to a book that I became obsessed with this past year called The Radical Imagination.
Oh, I love it.
And to me, it's it's a philosophy. It's a belief that collective creative imagination comes from from really trying times, and those that actually bring the most value and who can imagine the world not as it is but as it can be are often those that are the most oppressed. And I've been thinking a lot about that over the past 2 years. In particular, you watched what happened after the protests and in the Black community and with artists, and I can't help but to think they're paving a new pathway for us that isn't that different from 1918 and 1919, when we were also in a pandemic, and it was years of incredible violence against the Black community, and yet the moment of the Harlem Renaissance, right? They began to help us imagine a world not as it was, but as it could be. And so I think when I think about DARE, I think we all should be looking to creatives of color and the way they're going to kind of show us a new path. And so for me, it's hopeful, but it's also what is the role that we all play in making sure that that work is lifted up.
Ashley, I plunked you, I think, into group one. What were some of the conclusions from your group?
We spent most of our time really just discussing how we view disruption in regards to parenting, especially with like how kids are, looked at from developmentally, and how there are these standards that are created and we should be challenging them or looking at them differently, or not necessarily taking sort of this line that has been created by society or who knows and saying my kid is either above or below it. And we also talked about just in the city of Columbus the ways that disruption has been happening, or Deanna shared how in her work there's a lot of disruption going on just in the arts in general, and also the idea that just because we did something before and it didn't work doesn't mean that we can't try again or that we can't look at it in a different way.
So one of the notes I was just making to myself here is thank you, Cindy. It was great seeing you. I'm going to walk away here. I'm going to stop saying disruptors, because a number of you have sort of pointed to this. I'm going to say disturbers. Maybe we need more disturbers. And maybe that's everyone that joined us today. A room full of Columbus disturbers. I don't know. I need to play.
Yeah, absolutely. That works.
We like that. We like disturbers.
Wave makers.
Wave makers. Makers of waves. I love it.
Yeah.
So we usually sort of end around 9:45 or so, just because I know people have to get off to the rest of their days, and we've sort of extended beyond that. So I appreciate all of you sort of staying on here. I don't have. I would tell you the information from next month. I don't have the information for next month. I think it's October 15th. In fact, I'm fairly certain it's October 15th is when we're going to meet again. But look for announcements. Look for more information about Creative Mornings. That's as much for Aubrey as much as it is for everyone else who's been here on the call.